Well, we got a quorum. We can go ahead and get started. Other people that are going to join, I'll just ask people to mute their devices. Martin's come in. Good to see you, Martin. Popping up there. This is a presentation that's going to discuss the technicals of using Revit with Enscape 4.2 in the new future with the new filters. But the way we got here, I found out this was coming, this preview version was coming, and it had this feature in it. And I reached out to Scott and Carrie and another person saying, give me some real world ideas. And I'll let Scott introduce himself, but a little bit of background. I think I first heard or learned of Scott when he was living out in Colorado in probably the spring of 2000 or 2001. I was using Revit on beautiful rustic mountain homes. And the attention to detail then was amazing. So that was a beautiful first impression. But Scott, if you would just introduce yourself and give people some context to your background.
Sure. I'm like Phil mentioned, I am an early adopter of Revit, so started using it in 1999 at Vought Fry Architects in Colorado. And my boss was great. I'd read an article in Cadence magazine. It was the holy grail of architecture. And so we were sick of Autodesk, and so we thought we'd try it. And first I'm like, well, it doesn't do much. And he's like, you don't understand. You just modeled a whole medical office building campus in 3D. Only the big guys can do that. So it was a game changer for a small firm to be able to compete with what big guys could do. And I got pulled away to a big guy, right? And so
and now Revit's part of Autodesk. So
yeah, and they did too, right? Yeah, Leonid calling me to say, look, if your child was going to die, would you sell it?
Right.
Yeah. Hard call, right? But he did, and we're here now, and it's definitely changed the industry, right? But what I do now, I call myself a project oversight architect, but I lead our BIM implementation group at Beck, and we're integrated architecture and construction. So my job is basically we build the buildings our architects design, and we build buildings for other architects too. But my job is to make sure the 2D tells the same story as the 3D is at the end of the day. So I train all of our architects how to use it in quote the right way. And then I review our projects, or different people on my team review our projects. And so one of the things we're going to talk about, I'm sure, is it's much more fun to review a project in Enscape than it is to just look at 2D drawings or even in the Revit model. So having this filter tool is pretty exciting to me.
What, from the standpoint of what Beck does, explain the sort of escalated importance of managing these kinds of pre-construction issues for a company that not only designs, but also constructs buildings.
Yeah. So I have to train all of our new hires that come in. And so our architects come from great firms, and they're used to, hey, the 2D contract document is what's true. And I'm like, well, yes, but most of our people, and even your consultants, whether you know or not, are looking at the models, right? So if your fire rated wall says it's fire rated, but doesn't really go up to deck, your MEP engineer is probably going to miss that, right? Not put a fire damper in there. And so we use the models for pre-construction. Our pre-construction group actually models in Revit. And we have our own software called Estimator that we do model-based estimating directly from our Revit models. So assembly codes are really big. So that's one thing a filter can help with. If things don't have assembly codes, I'll be able to see them. So anyway, we try and build the building like it's going to be built in real life. So constructability is an issue. Telling people, I love working for a construction company because the model has so much downstream value that if you're straight architecture, you don't get to use or input. So if we're doing self-perform work, we have people that can do logistics planning within Revit. But as it works for the architecture and interiors, it's really making sure all the materials are render ready. They're actually are what they are. Higher level of quality control. I don't know if it's actually higher level of quality control than some folks in other countries than America do. I've seen some really nicely controlled models from other people too. So I'm not claiming we have the best models on the planet or anything like that. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's great because the accountability when you know that you're also responsible for constructing it,
Right.
it I think it elevates the
Well,
time and attention to detail because you're not just trying to, turn electricity into drawings, you're trying to make buildings. To illustrate some of this stuff that Scott and I were
real
talking
quick
about.
to that
Yeah, go ahead.
exact point, the one thing we can do that a straight architecture can't do is we can tell people what we don't know. So we're able to put parameters in every one of our objects and every one of our views that is a design assist required. And we can just check this little box and that element can show up and we can put a little note in there. Hey, I need to talk to the waterproofer and the framer and the bricklayer before you actually do this detail, so where we don't have to CYA, we can really tell people what we
You
don't
can
know.
ask yourself that you don't know.
Yeah. And that's super freeing and
So
helps
I've
us.
got two projects. This is the Snowden Towers project that was done. It's a sample project. You guys can open it up. There's an article associated to this on LinkedIn, and it's also been copied over to the Chaos blog site. And this data set that's been tweaked, plus the data set that I'll use after this one, the data set, all this stuff is available. You guys can download it and dig through it. And because these data sets have view templates and the view templates contain filters, which contain filter definitions. Oh, and the projects also, my sample project also contains project parameters. If you transfer those standards into your project, it's going to build these view templates for you on the fly in your project template or even your project. The way I look at this is Enscape is not trying to create clash detection software where you run reports. It's just allowing you to view the model before it's built. And to me, that's the important part of clash detection. There's lots of clashes that don't touch, and there's lots of things that touch that aren't clashes. And so we're just trying to avoid the downstream stress of waiting. Then you explore it down here in a sophisticated clash detection software, whereas you could have been doing that live during the design review process across disciplines and just experience like a human. To Scott's point, you're just walking around and asking questions. So to show you the size of this, even though people say, well, can Enscape handle large projects? I think you want to look at it both ways. Yes, it can handle large projects, but it also has this enormous ease of use and flexibility. So for this project, I'm gonna I don't have a 3D view open. It's being created on the fly. So I just want to show you guys that it's not, there's no kind of, as a matter of fact, I'll take this 3D view and I'll delete it because I want to start from scratch to show you guys what's going on. It's going right back to the cover sheet. And then I've got a little shortcut, but I'll just click on the house option and it's going to open a 3D view out of everything, right? So you're going to see levels and grids and the entire project at every phase. And the first thing I'd suggest to you guys is when you're doing these kinds of design reviews, you want to have a view template set up. So there's a view template here to accentuate piping systems. And it's also going to go the extra step and take all the host elements and make them transparent. Because if you can't see things because things are in the way, it's confusing. And instead of having things open and pre-baked and people go, oh, he's pulled a fast one because he didn't start he started Enscape 10 minutes before the meeting. I'm going to go to the Enscape tab and start Enscape. So this is going to give you a sense. Well, the way I look at it is I want to be able to look at it faster than I can export it. So if it takes me 30 seconds or a minute to start Enscape with a project that's a fairly complex size, multidisciplines, transparent host elements, because I want to be able to see where pipes and ductwork and structure is. Let's see how long it starts. It doesn't, it's not like one button click in 1 second. It's going to take a moment, but I think that's an honest test for you guys to see how long this takes. So if the alternative to Enscape is export it and then assemble it, but you can start it and see it and walk around faster than you can export it, I think that's a good time saver if you're having to do this. The moment of project manager. What's that, Scott?
You might want to show that while Enscape's loading, you can click back over to Revit once it's done its export and keep.
Oh yeah, you can keep doing stuff.
Start doing your work while you wait for Enscape to come up.
Yeah,
in
it's
the
not like it's binding you up. And I'm going to show you a couple of things as I asked in questions with Scott about this too. We're here at the macro level, and then we'll go in a little bit and focus. It's a nice tip, I think, with the way Revit works with the on-demand section boxes, and then give you a sense of how Enscape behaves at the macro level and the micro level. So we're just going to, once this opens up, we'll just be able to walk around the project and see how it works right now out of the box. There's a couple of things I'd like to see. I've noticed that, well, now it's open, so I guess it's been about a minute. I'll have to find out later. If I move the view around, I'm getting a great frame rate here. If I double click on something, it's going to zoom into it. And all of these host elements are translucent. So this is going to stress out, I've got a 3080 RTX graphics card here. The challenge of seeing it at this level, I don't think it's that stressful. I like being able to see through things. And Scott's contention, I think one of your contentions, Scott, was, well, I would like to see transparent objects with lines on them, because it's kind of hard to tell what's in the foreground and what's in the background. And one of the things that I noticed right away, and we were chatting about, all of the stuff in this host file, like this is the plumbing sample project. So the filters that show up in Revit also show up here, but the filters only show up for the file that is the host file. All the links, the filters aren't working yet. And Scott, you were mentioning like that from a multidiscipline standpoint, that'd be important.
Yeah, it makes it, just so everyone's clear what he's talking about there. So if I'm in my architecture model and in Revit, I create a filter that says, oh, I want all my ductwork to be orange. I have a filter set up for that system, or
because that's your standard.
Right. In Revit, I will see that orange, but for some reason right now, Enscape can't bring the filter of a linked model through to it. So what we've been doing instead is kind of leaving the MEP alone and doing this kind of view here where the walls and floors and ceilings are transparent. I was playing with this last night, and I tried just like a 10% to 20% gradient or transparency.
I've got it set to 50%, but I see your point.
It's a little too much, but it was really helpful to see the plumbing, in the walls behind sinks and drinking fountains and things like that. So this view was really, really helpful. But
so I guess the only way at the moment, if you want to see the structural stuff colored based on its filter value, you'd have to open the structural file and have your filters set up there. But right. I'm hopeful that in short order, you'll be able to see filters across linked files. It'll be
one of the holy grails for us is what we do is we set a filter on our because we duplicate floor slabs. I know not everyone does, but we have all of the architectural, structural elements, because we control the dimensions on them still. So we'll have our own slabs, and structural will have their own slabs. And one of the biggest things is to make sure those two things align. So we will set a filter that makes the structural slab red and the architectural slab blue. And anywhere you see purple, everything's good. If you see either one of those colors by itself, there's a problem. There's coordination.
Oh, right.
So if we could see that here, it'd be like, hey, you're walking around, I see purple, everything's good. Oh, wait, there's bright blue. I know that
there's blue or red. Something's weird.
Exactly. And so hopefully that's a feature.
Look, I hope you guys feel like this frame rate is pretty good. Someone had asked, well, if you're going to use it for kind of pre-construction design review, it's not really clash detection. It's just looking for problems. I don't want to wait till we get to clash detection. They're like, how do you capture the view? And I was like, function print screen. Or save a view. Like, I don't know how complicated it needs to be.
Right. So we do this whole model audit process, and I take a snapshot, but Craig and I were playing with this last night. You have this issues tool in there, and it'll save the snapshot right within Enscape.
Within the issue.
Yeah, and then you can save that out, export it, and load it back in later. So you could use it to track these issues right here. I'm not talking about the BIM issues plugin. There's the communication one, that little comments button next to your house.
Comments icon.
Yeah.
So the other thing I want to show you guys is this is more of a tip in Revit, but the results of it get shown in Enscape. If I go to a plan view, let's go to one that's a little more complicated. Yeah, this is okay. I like jumping between plan views and 3D views really quickly, and kind of sectioning off what you don't need to see, right? So if you don't need to see the whole universe, there's a point where you're like, okay, we're focusing on the whole project, but right now we just need to focus on this department or these rooms or this space. So I'm going to zoom in here to this area of the building. And if this space is important, this is why I like using the default 3D view as the view that's driving Enscape. Is you can either select the selection box tool. I use a keyboard shortcut where I hit the B key twice, and it slices the building. It makes a little block around it, turns everything else off. That also impacts this is now the default 3D. So if we go back to Enscape, you've just minimized the amount of compute that it takes to render the space. If you're trying to figure out, you could select a run of pipe and go section box around this run, and it's only going to show those pieces in it. I think it's just a good way to minimize compute, to get the project to open quickly. If you don't need to open the entire project to get to what you need to have a meeting about, you can just select that, build a section box, and then kick on Enscape. All right, so I'm going to close this project because I think, having structure that's color coordinated by section types, or having mechanical systems ductwork by return air, supply air, etc. All that's pretty well known. A lot of the examples that Scott brought up and Carrie brought up for these real world situations are illustrated in this sample project that, it's kind of an evolved project since 2015 or so. And it's not a big project, but it's got a lot of big ideas in it. So we've got the project open, and I'm going to go ahead and start Enscape again. And Scott, so give me an idea with regard to Beck. What size projects do you guys work on? What types of projects?
They vary quite a bit, but primarily healthcare is a huge market sector. Higher education, huge market sector. Used to do lots of big office towers. That's not so much anymore. Now we're converting those to residential. Our aviation, some airport work. What am I forgetting? Oh, hospitality.
That's it. Yeah.
And
yeah, good.
like museums and things like that.
Design through construction.
Yes.
All right.
So here's some stuff for people like Morphosis and things like that are fun that we didn't get to design, but they trust us to figure it out.
So just to reinforce what I was talking about before, the importance of having view templates that evolve into your template is because instead of having to select multiple views to go to a certain condition in Revit, if you're doing a design review of a large lobby space and you want to look at mechanical systems, structural systems, finished systems, you don't want the camera jumping around. You want it to stay still. So there's filter definitions here. There's view filters, and then those perk up into view templates. So from the same location, and Enscape is sitting here in the background, we can jump between these ideas without the camera flying around again. So this is the real world view. And I would say this is a good tip just for using Revit. You want to have a view template that says default, because if you create a view template and it's doing something to the materials and the overlays, and then you jump back to none is none. None doesn't do anything. But if you save a default value, you can always return back to the real world state. So here's the first value, Scott. This says to be reused. What was the idea behind this? The idea that it was something about filters. No, not filters, phases. Phases can't show you what you're going to get rid of and bring back, like furnishings, like other materials, like equipment that's in a project. And here's a view in Enscape. So how would you guys use that to capture pieces of a project where it's like a reuse project, where you're reusing elements?
Yeah. So this is more, it'd probably be like doors, things that are existing. You can create a shared parameter where, how do I say this? Where Revit phasing falls flat a lot of times on big projects for any kind of construction sequencing, or even just healthcare sequencing of phased construction, you'd be able to group elements utilizing a shared parameter and be able to put these filters on to show, okay, you know, phase one includes this whole build out, but how we're actually going to do that is through a bunch of sub phases, right? So this tool would
phases aren't discrete enough.
Right. So this would let us extend that capability and really walk the contractors through, hey, these are the things that are happening now, these are the things that are happening next, and so on. So I can see a huge use for that. What we were talking about was demolition, right? There's sometimes that you're demoing objects and Revit just lets you demo them. It does. You would have to have another parameter that says, oh, demo to be disposed of, or demo to be reused.
That's the more, that's the more discrete piece. Like, what kind of demo?
Right.
Is it specialty demo? Do people have to come in white suits and breathing filters? And this is a really easy thing in Revit, you guys. You make a project parameter and you have to decide, is it a type parameter for everything the same type, or is it an instance parameter? So we can see there is an option. If we select a component, it says, oh, to be reused. This is an instance parameter. If we clicked on the edit type, it would be a type parameter. And so the ease of this is like, well, that object doesn't need to be reused. And one of these side tables does need to be reused. And as soon as you do that, you jump back over to Enscape, and now it identifies as, oh, this thing doesn't need to be reused. And now this is color coded green because it does. So it's a more discrete way of visualizing filter information, or not filter, sorry, phase information that has to be very specific. Now the next one, so the next option here is for warnings. So I'll go ahead and apply this, and you can see the scene has just changed properties. The floors have become transparent, the walls have become transparent, and it's now color coded. And everything has its kind of natural RGB value except these two doors. And what Scott's thinking behind this when we were chatting was, hey, sometimes things need to change colors and alert you, not based on a specific value that you assign to it, but based on a rule that you've created. So in this case, we're saying, show me anything where the door is less than 24 inches and show me anything where the door is more than 36 inches. Just light it up. And you can keep the exception if you need, but if you just want to find them. So what other kinds of use cases would you guys use for things that are, warnings in a project? What kind of things would you look out for, Scott?
Warnings, primarily because you have doors highlighted, I'm thinking of doors that require electrical rough-in. Like, we want to know, because that's really expensive when the door guy gets there to hook up the VIN card reader if it needed power and there's not power there, right? So we have, for all of our FF&E, and we have a checkbox, requires hardwire. So for things like furniture that's got to get plugged in, does it require data? Those kind of things. So, and we'll probably talk about this later, responsibility.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility?
Yeah, whose responsibility is it? Yeah,
So
the only difference with this one.
Yeah.
The only difference here is this is, again, another example of, well, not only do we want the thing to light up based on a rule, but we're also going to use a transparency override. So even though at the moment Enscape doesn't respect filter values coming from linked files, it will respect the value of Revit if you override the transparency of stuff. So in this case, we've overridden the transparency of all these categories except for doors. And as a result, you can see through things to things that have received this warning.
And you might want to share that. That was a good filter we came up with, was all things transparent, but the linked models. Kind of the nice thing about the filter not passing through was I was really able to easily turn everything, just make everything transparent, and it didn't push it through to the link. You might want to show people, if it's not clear, that right now the filter, if you want to make something solid red like that, the filters only work on the projection line, pattern, And the projection
Yeah.
pattern, I kept bumping my head. I was like, oh, we want to show what lights are required to be on emergency backup power. And
Yeah.
so our typical standard is those things glow yellow and they've got like a red hatch to them. So I was trying to do, can I do a solid yellow background and a foreground of a diagonal? And right now you can only filter by using the solid hatch and giving it a color, right?
Yeah, and that's just a Revit thing. You can override with a solid color or a pattern, but you can't override with a material. So you can't give certain things like a warning tape. It just doesn't work.
But you can only use a solid hatch, right?
That's
you
right.
can't set that filter to be a diagonal hatch either, right?
No, that in Revit. Yeah. So the next thing, this is the next example is really more around renderings and visualization, but this came from an interior designer last year, and they had this use case where they wanted to show the whole project, but they wanted to de-emphasize some context and really focus on what needed to be rendered. So this filter is showing everything as this kind of white color, and then it's just showing the things that are to be rendered. And they're doing this live and in renderings, but they were spending time in Photoshop, like rendering white mode, then rendering regular mode, and then, drawing lines around things, and a lot of post-production. But this allowed them to say, hey, I want everything in the model to be white, just kind of make it de-emphasized, but certain aspects of it we want to highlight, and then we either want to walk through live so that the client can focus on just what's that design issue. And again, this is it's a simple instance parameter. You select it and you select display as white, no, yes. And when you do that, it removes the white override material. So it's actually removing a material and then showing the real world value. It's just a nice rendering hack, but it's also this idea that you can turn everything white except for the things that you need to focus on.
Right. And
go ahead, buddy.
So you did. It's funny how people think in reverse, right? So I would have said, I'm going to show less objects in color, so I'm going to have my parameter be like, render this, check. And so I would just grab the stuff I want rendered, and then my filter would be like, everything that does not say render this is white.
Yeah, I think that's the if I go back to Revit and look at the filter definitions, display as white, if it does not equal yes, and yes is checked, then it displays as white. And then if we look at if we look at the filters itself, display as white says, yeah, everything gets overridden except what's checked for yes. And then it removes the override, which shows the real world material. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. That filter box, if people don't know, I did mine different. I wanted to save my normal view template that I use for my coordination or quality control view in 3D. And I just made a whole bunch of filters that I'd want to cycle through. And now that Revit has that enable filter button, you can just have all your filters there instead of switching from view template to view template, which is totally cool. I like that. You could just have a group of filters for QA/QC in Enscape.
Oh, nice.
Have them disabled. So what my thinking is I'm in my template, I'm going to build all these filters into my QA/QC views and then just have them disabled. And then in any view, if somebody wants to enable any of them, they'll have them without, messing with the view template.
So this is the idea here was checking for things that are not on the appropriate category. And the settings in this template is like, if anything's a generic model, I want you to light it up. Because why should we have things set as generic models? They need to schedule. So this is only looking for things of the category that's generic model, and then it lights it up. And, in the article, I was thinking, okay, well, yeah, maybe we need to schedule carpet. We need to schedule light fixtures, screens. We need to schedule furniture. Okay, there's this little entourage-y thing. Maybe that's a generic model. That's okay. But I don't know how many times I've looked at schedules and went, yep, it's scheduled, it's automatic. And then you realize someone built something on the wrong category. So you could use this to check that things that are furniture are actually on the furniture, or what's the other furniture? There's two furniture categories. You want to
system.
walk around system furniture, furniture systems. So you want to light all that stuff up and then walk around. And if you see something that's not highlighted red, you go, whoa, wait a minute. What category is this thing? And it's just people are working quickly and they don't mean to do it deliberately. But sometimes things get built in one category and they don't get switched over, which means they don't show up in your schedule. So it's all there in plan, section, and elevation. It looks like a table. It seems like a table, but then it's not a table. So this will help you solve those problems.
Have you figured
Just to
out you can do a filter to find in-place families? I've just
if it's a category, is that one that you don't want in place families?
We don't want in-place families, but they can be of any category. So I don't know if that's anyway. I'm not sure we can filter that right now.
Filter for in-place families. That's almost like a religious discussion because some people go, "Oh, I have to have an in-place family sometimes."
Right.
We can run a script that updates a parameter, filter by that, but it would have to require something else to be run.
Who's that being clever?
This is Alex, the BIM manager.
Hey, Alex, thanks. That's cool. So you could run a script to identify in place
and like update a parameter or check a box saying this is in place.
Oh, right. Have it fill out its comments or something.
Yeah.
That's a good call.
But they could ignore that, so that's not really a long-term solution.
If you haven't seen Scott excited yet, this is one that got him excited when we were talking, because apparently things that need blocking are really important if they don't have blocking and all the finishes and the walls and everything is in place. And someone shows up and goes, there's no blocking for this piece of equipment. And explain, Scott, what you're talking about. Like everybody starts pointing fingers.
Yeah, it's a scope miss. And a lot of times we like to try and, self-perform the drywall, and, our project engineers spend a ton of time going through every piece of equipment. Does it need blocking? What kind of blocking does it need? And, as a general contractor, we're going to own it if we wanted the stud guy to provide it, but the, specialties guy, he, it might get carried twice. It might. So anyway, it's just one of those items that's real easy with a checkbox, requires blocking, check,
right.
And then you see them all.
And I think for this example, instead of using an instance parameter, I'm presuming that if it's by type, another religious discussion. But hey, everything of this type, this kind of lighting fixture, if it goes anywhere else in the building, it requires blocking. This screen, even, egress signage, site signage, same idea. If it requires blocking, and go ahead.
I found, and see if you can check this out. Shared nested components also don't get the filter. So our cabinets, because I was doing upper cabinets, I'm like, I'm going to show that these all need blocking, and the geometry that is native to that family shows up. I made it brown because blocking B starts with B, whatever. It made sense to make it brown. But the doors, which are nested panels, and the hardware, it didn't get overridden. So I'm assuming it's the same problem as it can't pass through to a link file. In Revit, it does show it in the filter, but it doesn't pass through to Enscape.
Is there's still that family parameter that says, when you create a parameter, it's shared or it passes through the family? Like if you create a table with 4 chairs and the table's the host, but the chairs don't share that, they don't schedule through. And I wonder if you tweak that value so that they schedule, then they're kind of also recognized. We'll have to check that out.
Yeah. Anyway.
So you're saying the host gets the override, but not the nested.
Correct.
All right. We'll have to look at that. The next example is, Scott's point, things that have a top constraint. We're coming up on the last one here. Things look the same, but they don't behave the same. So how do you know things have a top constraint? It's done it again. I don't know if it's gonna. Yep, it did. I'll go back and start it. Something happened before when I changed the view filter. It went poof. So I had to restart Enscape. Think where would it start to cost time and money if you don't properly identify things that have a top constraint or that are attached top bottom?
Right. Well, this was for top constraint. Revit lies. So if you draw a wall and you give it an unconnected height of 10 feet, reports 10 feet to our estimators. If you then take that wall and attach its top to the level of, or the slab above, and that slab's at 16 feet, the wall still reports an unconnected height of 10 feet. So seeing walls that have been attached to something indicates that they may not actually report their proper height. So, and then the other filter that I'm not sure if you're going to show that's very
So
similar.
do you prefer to attach top bottom so that it's
We
attached
do
to the
not.
slab underside, or do you attach it to a level?
No,
Don't
so
ever attach it.
Never
Okay.
attach. If you know your floor thickness, so every wall in level 1 goes from level 1 up to level 2 minus 5 1/4 thickness if that's your, composite slab assembly, and that will give the true unconnected height. The only time you will attach is you'll take it up to the bottom. If something's sloping, we'll attach it.
Oh, right. If it's
gotta
got
figure
some
it
kind of circuitous pattern at the top. So otherwise you don't attach, and you identify it with a parameter as,
Right.
and the parameter is an instance parameter.
No, it's the normal top and bottom constraints of
Right.
in Revit, right? Every wall can have a base constraint with a positive or negative offset and a top constraint of a positive. And as long as those are, from level 1 to level 2 minus something, or level 1 to level 1 plus something, it will report the proper height, with the actual modeled height, I should say.
Right.
Where just that attach tool, it just reports the original height. So like if your little 6-inch pool there, if you attach that to the ceiling above and picked on it in Revit, it's still going to tell you it's only 6-inch tall wall.
That is, gotcha. So you don't attach elements to the top because it's not going to give you the appropriate reporting value. It's going to mislead.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last one is things that require special power. And you had mentioned this before, showing up on site, and then doors that they require power because in the event of emergency, the magnets release and they close. What are some of the other examples?
Well, there's so many now, like guest room doors, they have a strike. Those are sometimes battery powered. So it's good to know, not always with an electrical connection does it need. Any automatic door, with power openers or closers, you'd think it would be common sense, but we're actually trying to figure out how do we tell people which side of the frame does the electrical need to come in on? That gets a little crazy, but.
I think you also mentioned like specialty furniture that has plugs or connections to charge your mobile device. If you get on site and you decide to start, laying out this furniture and there's not power there, what do you do?
So the guy's got to drill through, get one of those expensive diamond bit drills and drill through concrete 12 inches. Who knows how deep, right?
To run conduit or
because these are going to be floor boxes, right? Or floor connections typically. Sure. If they miss that. So those are huge elements for stuff in the middle of the room. Like you have that lamp, right? That lamp needs power, and
but if you don't supply power for it, and the boxes are not just simple plugs. I mean, they're in the floor of a commercial building, so people are going to vacuum over it. It's going to get beat up, or it has to have a cover that pops open and the plugs down inside it. You just can't do these at the last minute. And I think the overall idea is, instead of creating all these models and then going to an amazing and appropriately complicated clash detection tool, we just want to open it up and look at the same space in different view modes. Show me this space as the electrical sub. Show me as the mechanical sub. Show me as the structural engineer. Show me as the architect. Show me as, one of the things you mentioned is sometimes the owner, like you guys might, or the owner buys or the owner installs things. And if you don't track those elements, it gets expensive.
Yeah, there's all kinds of things like that, right? If there are certain elements that the owner is going to buy but want us to install, and then there's things that the owner is going to buy and the owner is going to install. But our drawings, we show everything because maybe there needs to be an electrical outlet for something that the owner is providing and installing later after we're gone. So having filters that clearly indicate whatever the responsibility to furnish, the responsibility to rough in, that's the other one, because there may be a third person that's responsibility to rough in, and then the person who's responsible to install it, right? So there's kind of 3 choices there. So yeah, you can end up with a whole bunch of check boxes in your families, but at the end of the day, your design team, when they're doing things, they know this, and giving them a place to record what they already know so it doesn't get lost with a simple check is a really smart thing to do. And I was just starting to think about, if I was an electrical engineer, an MEP engineer, what kind of things would I use this tool for? And I imagine items that need to be on certain circuits, or I'm really curious to see how other trades would use this, but I bet there's some really good applications. Structural moment connections versus, there's so many ideas.
Oh yeah, the structural engineer so it was Carrie, and a structural engineer, and they said they wanted to track steel grade because that's an expensive upcharge, but it may be necessary. And I said, well, is that a parameter in Revit? And he's like, no, we would add that, and then we could add that information so we could, it's all in schedules, but it's hard to look at a spreadsheet and then assemble it in your mind. They just wanted to see the corollary to the spreadsheet. And overall, this is, like I said, this is not an expensive, complicated tool to use from the standpoint of running clash reports. The AI in this clash tool is experienced people sitting in a room, looking at the project on the screen and going, okay, great. I love the materials. Show me what needs blocking, and getting agreement across the room without waiting 2 weeks to go, okay, let's export our models to this clash tool. Let's open them up. Let's run clash tests. It's like, no. Let's do it in the moment right now. Every time we communicate, let's not wait till 2 weeks where we have to untangle things and go back. So overall, I think it's an interesting use case, because normally people would just use Enscape for, oh, it looks beautiful, keep going. But now it's like, wait a minute, I like the way it looks, but the pieces aren't in there to make it mean what it needs to mean. Like, show me things that need blocking. Overall, you guys can pop on your microphones as well and ask questions of Scott if you'd like. Oh, Carrie refers to this validation while authoring. Yeah, like do things in the moment. If you see a problem, don't wait and go, oh, I'll get to that 2 weeks later. Let me write that down. Do it in the moment.
I could go off for hours on that. Why people won't, hey, you just built that wall, you put a material on it, but you won't make the call of what to tag that material. It's like, why? You're going to wait for somebody else to come in and decide that should be WD7 when it's like, yes, validate while authoring. Own it.
And just own it and be accountable for it. Is that, I guess, in a way, if it's almost like a technology manager, BIM manager, technology director could build these filters for the team and say, hey, you guys, I want you to go through these filters once a week as a team. Just look at them. And as people, it could be death by meeting or death by filter if you have too many. But I don't think a dozen is too many if they're really good and they get you to think about the project, not just in terms of what does it look like? Is it beautiful? Is it elegant? But also, how is this working? How does it go together? Can we see the mechanical and utility runs underneath the slab, coming up through the slab, getting to those spaces, and just be able to do it in the moment? Why not? Any questions, you guys? It's a good group. Oh my gosh, there's even people from Canada.
I have a question. This is a great discussion. I love.
Who is this? Who's talking?
My name is Chris Munganest.
Where are you from, Chris?
I'm in Boston.
Okay.
Elkis Manfredi.
Okay, good. Thanks. Yeah, give some context.
So I just would trying to do this at the same time while watching you guys.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing the transparency or the sort of overrides in the 3D view that I am seeing in Revit. I'm not seeing them translate into Enscape. I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong.
Okay, I did this when I first installed. You got to go to settings and actually enable filtering under there. Yeah, so that's probably unchecked.
Sorry, should have covered that at the beginning.
And I believe you're going to have to close your Enscape window and reopen it. I don't think that's going to kick in right away. It might.
And the other thing, Chris, if the transparency, if you try to make objects and linked files transparent with a filter, like we were saying, it doesn't presently work. You can't manipulate the filter of a linked element.
But
just go through the transparency of the model category. That's where you're getting it. And that'll work on filters or in the host file.
and that's important to understand that you don't have to use filters if your view template has model category objects overridden with transparency. That's going to come through. So that's the way I did. I just tried it a couple different ways.
Thank you for that. That actually, I didn't even have to restart Enscape. I just after checking that box, it instantly worked. So thank you for.
Oh, cool.
I knew there was something I was missing, but
don't feel bad. I was doing the same.
I'm not
thing.
trying to be clever. I just forgot to talk about it. It's not checked by default when you install 4.2.
Well, because
that's kind of a weird choice, I think.
Well, it'll mess up things. And I realized this too. I wanted to go back to my normal rendered views and stuff was transparent. And so if you have, before in Enscape, it didn't matter what your transparency settings were in your model.
It didn't come through.
And now it's like my TVs, I'm seeing the walls behind them. Why? And it's because we've got a transparency setting and making them dash as they are by owner, but we still wanted them to render. I did want to say one thing.
Go ahead, Scott. Sorry, buddy.
Why I think this is really interesting is we are trying, and it's going to sound trite, one of our values at Beck is caring. And for our subcontractors, we all get to play in this real world, virtual world. And they just show up on site and are given a piece of paper and said, go paint this P1, right? But if you can show them their work too, it just extends a lot, right? We get them involved. That was the other huge thing was, getting your fire marshal involved and being able to walk them through the building to look at your exit signs and things like that, right? And then, this is on emergency power, that's not on emergency power. Try and get the people actually doing the work involved. And I think it goes a long way to getting the product you want at the end of the day. So I love that you could isolate a specific scope and say, hey, let's have a meeting and let's talk about your scope. Here it is in this interesting format.
Look, I love that section box tool. Pick something or pick two things corner to corner and just go section box.
Yep.
And the 3D view, if it's driving Enscape, by the time you flick over, it's already just isolated that part of the model.
But you could also stick that up on a website. And
wait, who's that talking? Where is he?
That's me.
That's me.
Sorry.
Hey, this is Kerry Thompson in New Zealand. Hey, Kerry, good to hear you, buddy.
Yeah, no, you could also clip out what you're talking about, the area of focus, and just email a link to them, open up on their phone, and you could actually tell them what's going on. And it's interactive, I take it, to be able to go and highlight specific points.
Yeah, you guys, we should have another conversation about how Beck uses Enscape to such an entirety where on drawings are links to QR codes that for certain projects, almost every room in the building has a panorama file. So you can spin it around and see what the finished condition looks like. It's very, very thorough where they're taking that analytic information and linking it to visual information. So yeah, Kerry, who's speaking, he was one of the guys that I said, hey, Kerry, give me some ideas for real world stuff here. So it's a little early for your time, but I appreciate it. Let's see. Joseph Barbieri is there. Yes, Joseph, we are providing a recording. It'll just take me a day or so to get it posted because as architects are, you guys didn't all join on time. Let's see. To make things more complicated, this is Alex Stein. To make more complicated with nesting, our casework cabinet panels are generic, not casework, but we could pass through the shared parameter. Oh, you could pass through the shared parameter. Okay, well, maybe that'll light up. Well, I've got that written down as an action item, Scott. I want to find out if shared parameters, when you pass it through by flicking, because then they'll schedule, does that mean it's also going to get that color code? Any other questions? Like I said, it's a good group. I can see Mira's there. She's all the way from the Great White North, calling down from Canada. For the sake of me, I saw somebody I'm in Holden Beach, North Carolina, and Christina Holden joined. There's not a lot of Holdens in the world. There are a lot down here. Wondering where you guys are from. Alex is there, Alex Rodriguez. Oh, it's a great group. Good. Any other questions, everyone? We're getting on to the top of the hour. I don't want to hold you and don't want to hold Scott. He's got things to do. Hey, Carrie, what did you mean by this? You said you can also drive things with color overrides to paint things. Were you talking about using the painting tool?
I just use a bit of Dynamo. Yeah, if you paint something, it seems to come through and render it. So I used to use a color tool on Dynamo. I selected a category and it just colored it all green or red or whatever. And the idea is,
Oh, but it's doing it with a material.
Well, it just does it, yeah. And then you take the color off and it takes the color away. So you could run a script that would recolor a whole view.
When you say color, do you mean like a filter override, or do you mean a material override on a category?
Material override, from what I understand, like a paint. Like you go back into the paint scenario. You know how you have the paint thing in Revit?
Yeah, you just use a paint tool, but this will paint the entire object.
Well, if you apply it to a category, if you apply it to a specific thing, because that's an override, isn't it?
Yeah.
You might be just able to paint the specific focus point. I'm not sure. I didn't play with it much.
All right.
But
Scott?
The paint thing, it just seemed to be the color. So you could actually go and recolor the whole model without any filters at all. You just color it up.
Just apply materials to it, but not one at a time.
Paint material like overrides, and it seemed to fix the problem. So if you wanted to go and make all the linked files green, for example, you just run a category, make all the linked files green as a Dynamo script. And
yeah, that's one thing I couldn't find. And you can't do linked files. You can't apply filters at the moment to linked files anyway. So you can't say, oh, make this link this color, this link this color. Just like a quick way to.
You might be able to do. I'll have a play. But the thing about it is I use a lot of Revit to aggregate other Revit files underneath and AutoCAD files and things. And it'd be great if we could get the linking working as well. So that, you know, the steel stuff's linked into my architectural stuff, and I want to go and look at the services plan overloaded in my framing, for example, without having to bring the model into one whole thing. So you actually link it through. So that was how I would start to look at it. I mean, I used the technique for years like this, but I use color overrides to do it, or material overrides.
Yeah, you're talking about CAD again, aren't you?
No, I'm talking about, forget about CAD. I'm talking about
Barry's a master of many technologies.
An aggregation of a whole range of things. I mean, the beauty about this thing is it's done while you're authoring it, whereas stuff like that's downstream, like Visito and stuff like that, has to be actually published before it can be analyzed. Whereas here, it's in the moment. I reckon that's the really big plus, because you're in there, you can see what's going on instantly.
Validation while authoring.
As you're authoring, you got the right people making the decisions, not people further down the line.
So we're not trying to make it an easier way to do clash detection. We're trying to remove the need to do, to do complicated clash detection just by doing it in the moment. Scott, anything else? Any closing ideas? Closing thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
I was bringing up my shared problem to show you after the call's done, where the panels don't. No, I don't have any final thoughts. This was great. And I think this feature is going to go a long way. We hope that they can get it to work through linked models, and then that'll be a neat.
Look, well, the rigor that you guys put into Enscape for doing things that are visual, combined with what you have talked about being able to do that's analytic, seems like a really nice combination. And just being able to push the start button instead of pushing the export and wait button.
Well, and I don't know if the interior designer who gave you that suggestion's on the line, but I know our interior design team, and I'm thinking mill workers, right? Turn everything off but the mill work and show it full rendered and show them, hey, this is all the stuff you're building. This is what we want it to look like. That's
so they're not confused about the extent of what's mill work and what's not.
Right. Is that wood panel mine? Where's it stop? That's a roll-on panel. That's not yours. You're building up to it, so I can see really good uses for interiors.
That's great. Hey, Carrie, everybody, thanks for joining. And Scott, absolutely, thanks for you. And really appreciate you joining in and talking about these. And you guys giving ideas about writing this best practice article. It's been fantastic. Everybody, have a great day. Thank you very much. Take care.
Shout out to Mark Easy.